So as I said, I teach children year round when they're in school at the Northwest School of Integrated Studies. And I have gardening with them once a week, which to me just feels like an incredible privilege. But then there's, of course, the winter, which is a little challenging. But we did do an all-year gardening this year, which really speaks to the need for children to understand rhythm. If there's anything that's really important about family gardening, it's rhythm. So for a child to really understand a seasonal rhythm, a temperature rhythm, a task rhythm that is attached to gardening, and just feel that rhythm within all the tasks, all the seasons, all the festivals that we do that celebrate the earth. It really grounds them in what it is that's happening outdoors in nature. And when we pair that with nurturing a garden, then the top part of what it is that your head and heart understand as a child mingle together. And it really helps them to put it together that they're caring for something larger than themselves. And it doesn't matter if they're little. It doesn't matter if they're preschoolers or they're kindergartners, 1st through 5th and 6th, or even older. They just connect at a little bit different level per age. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. The gardening students that I had up today, they're between 9 and 11. And it's a really perfect age for children to get super active in the garden. Prior to that, sometimes children need a little more guidance than they do when they're this age. So that was the selection criteria for today. So the students that I teach are from, excuse me, kindergarten all the way through 6th grade. And their gardening classes are about 45 minutes long. And so before we did this gardening class, 2 weeks ahead of time, I had an indoor class with the children that were going to be up here. And I inventoried their feelings about why you would want to garden. And this is what they had to say. Of course, they want food. So we went all through what foods they like and what foods their families or they have been successful in growing. And it was amazing, the diversity. A lot of children have traveled outside of the United States to tropical climates. And so there were actually things like avocados and mangoes and things like that. So we had a little conversation about what you can grow here for real in the summer and through some parts of the winter. So that was their first and foremost answer. Then they said growing, and I asked them what kind of growing. And they said, well, you know, sometimes we grow ourselves and when we grow gardens. And I thought that was a pretty insightful answer. The next thing they said was gardens make things beautiful. And for a 9-year-old to understand developmentally, apart from themselves, that what they're doing has an effect in the environment is a really amazing skill. And it comes from practice over and over and over of them understanding completely different ways that they can beautify their environment. And that doesn't need necessarily to just be the garden. It could be their kitchen table. It could be their dinner table. It could be, you know, their mother's bedside table. It could be art that they make about the garden or about the earth. So that was really important that they said that, because it lets me know that some part of what we're doing in gardening, they get it. Diversity is another one that I think is a direct result of being taught that, you know, a garden can certainly have nice straight rows and have, you know, a certain type of crop that gets planted all together. but it also could have lots of different things all planted together, and that diversity has different reasons for helping the earth. So for example, today, we looked pretty heavily into the diversity present here on a permaculture farm in terms of this rhythm right now of spring. And in that rhythm, what do the bees need to keep alive? Because it's very cold up here still. We're about 2,000 to 3,000 feet above Paonia. And so our trees are not blooming yet. But a few things are. And so the children went around and figured out what was the best bee food today. And the reason they felt like that was possible was because there were so many things to choose from. So they chose dandelions, and they chose Nanking cherry bushes, they chose currant bushes. They went out in the woods and they found paintbrush. There's wild phlox in the woods. There's mustard flowers, etc. So the dandelion is obviously the best one. It's the most open right now. So we also picked dandelions and talked about their worthiness in our landscape and what they do for our health, etc. The other thing they said, which was surprising to me, was that they said that gardening makes their hearts strong. And I had to dig a little deeper about that. And when I did dig a little deeper, they said that gardening makes your heart strong because you have to take care of things. And so that makes your heart a bigger organ. For a 10-year-old and 11-year-old, that's something really special to understand about their relationship with the earth. They said it's really good to be outside and shovel. And particularly a lot of the boys said that they love to fling things around with a shovel, and that makes them really feel strong. And that they like helping their parents dig in the dirt. And then they said that the food at the top was what makes them healthier. So they really felt like the reason you have a garden at home is because the food that you grow makes you a healthier person. So that was a really nice class to have. We also made invitations for their parents to come and join us. We talked about a lot of principles that we go by when we're planting plants. The picture in this slide is my teaching partner at the school. Her name is Candace Orlando, and she has a farm. And she was showing the kids the bee waggle dance. And they all loved learning the bee waggle dance. If you don't know what the bee waggle dance is, the bee waggle dance is what bees do to signal where their hive is when they come upon a flower. And they signal that to their coworkers so that everybody knows, oh, the flowers are over here and the hive is over here. They do a big, elaborate dance. So the kids really understand that dance. So I alluded to this rhythm thing about classwork at the school, and that goes for your family garden as well. Gardening is definitely year-round, although some of it's more quiet in seasons where we don't have a lot of warmth in the environment. But for the most part, it's year-round. And we can emphasize that by the things that we do in each season. So for instance, when we start the garden at the school, it's in the fall. And we still have cool weather crops that can come to maturity in the fall season before it gets too cold. And those cool weather crops that can be grown here that are really successful and super easy for children to do are the mustards. So you can grow mustard, you know, the green mustard. You can also grow kale. You can also grow mizuna, all kinds of Asian greens. You can, excuse me, you can sometimes get an actual crop of radishes in the fall that will come to maturity depending upon when you put them in. You can plant spinach, lettuce, etc., and then you can continue to cover them in raised beds all the way until November here. So we focus on crops in the fall that if we want to plant, they're crops that are going in and out in less than 60 days. So all of those greens can go in and out in less than 60 days. The radishes can, et cetera, et cetera. But then generally when we come back to school, it's August. And so August signals the fact that we have still crops in the ground that can be harvested. And that would be things like tomatoes. We can sometimes harvest eggplant and peppers. We can sometimes harvest edible flowers like calendula is in our garden. We can harvest perennial herbs that we can use to make medicine in the wintertime. And so the rhythm of harvest and planting in the fall is nice because it balances out what we're doing and still very active. In the winter, what we do often is gardeners and as teachers of gardening is we teach the kids what it is that you do with what you grow in a long-standing way. So the Learning Council, of which I'm a part and is sponsoring this event, has lunches that they put on in the wintertime out of the Trading Post. A lot of children go and help cook that food, and a lot of that food came out of family gardens or small farms. So they understand that connection. My fervent hope is that at the school where we use the garden, that eventually we will be able to grow enough to supply some of those lunches that we're cooking together. We also look very heavily at seed saving. And I think that's one opportunity at a family garden that is a super unique opportunity. So if you're growing a family garden and you want to, one of the things that can really benefit the earth is saving seeds. Particularly because when you grow a garden that's small and somewhat contained in a town setting or even in a small country place, saving seeds is something that can teach you about how the whole entire rhythm of the plant, number one. Number two, we might have really well-bred seeds coming out of our local gardens that could benefit the whole of the valley, because the seeds that are grown here are seeds that will almost always germinate well and continue to grow well. And there are a few things about saving seeds that make it really easy. And so pick up a seed saving book. Seed to Seed is one really good one. That's by Susan Ashworth. And just start educating yourself about the easy ones to save. Easy ones like sulfurs, like peas, really easy to save. They don't need necessarily a pollinator. They can cross, they can do whatever they want, and they're fine to save, and they don't mutate that much. So peas and beans, pretty much everything in the legume family can be saved really easily. The other good thing about saving seeds is the smaller the seed, the older the child. So when your children are maturing, they're able to deal with seeds a whole lot easier that are really small the older they get. But pea seeds and bean seeds are really small, but they're round, they're easy to pick up. And so for younger children, it's a great way to teach them about saving seed because they're easy to harvest. You can just go out in the field and crack open a pea and voila, there's a seed there if you let them stay long enough. And then we talk about how do you get those seeds? How do you get them out of what it is that they grew in? So for instance, wheat. We do a lot of work with wheat. And I encourage you at a family garden level to pick a wheat or pick a barley, pick any grain that feels like you're being called to grow it, and just grow a small patch of it. The good thing about growing grain is that it's an excellent cover crop. So for a place where the soil may not be the best and you haven't amended it to the place you'd like, a wheat is a perfect cover crop. Mix it in with some peas or mix it in with some vetch, hairy vetch, and voila, you have a lasagna for your garden. All you have to do is cut it down, let it lay, and it'll fertilize your garden. But in the meantime, cut off the wheat and teach your kids what wheat looks like when it's growing. They love to clean wheat, and because it's a dance that you dance on the chaff and the seeds come out, and then we have to winnow them in the wind. And that's a wonderful way of them understanding beginning to end with a seed. The other thing that happens in the winter is festivals. And the festivals are really important in winter because it lets us understand that the earth only rests, but it doesn't die in the wintertime. It only rests. And where it rests and what it does in its resting state is part of all our winter festivals. So for instance, the first one that is starting to herald winter is the Festival of Courage that we have in the autumn time at the equinox. When we do that Festival of Courage, Michaelmas, in the autumn time, it lets us know that we're quieting down, and so is the earth. And everyone is starting to die down to the earth so that we can all rest. The next one is the solstice. And at solstice, we celebrate the light because the light is coming back. The next one is Candlemas in February. And so we celebrate Candlemas such that we know that the earth is starting to wake up. And we have all of these things that we can do to connect ourselves to what it is that we're not actively doing in the garden in the fall, spring, and summer, but that we're doing it in an in-breath way so that we understand that we're going inside in winter, but we don't stop working with the earth just because it's winter. In the spring, of course, everybody loves doing family gardens in the spring. What's not to love? A beautiful day like today, of course we want to get out and we want to push open the earth and we want to put seeds in her to get her growing. There are a few things that really help, and we'll talk about those in a minute. And of course, in the summer, growing things is not sometimes as easy as it looks. They need special things. Maybe they get dry and they need more or less water. Maybe they get too wet and they need less water. Sometimes they need extra food in the summertime because it's hot and it's dry. And so there's all these things that we can learn about the plants that we're growing that are specific to them. And we can pay attention at the scale of a family garden. And that activity of us doing that together as a family is a learning experience for everybody, no matter what level you're at for gardening. I just wanted to give you this quote. I don't know how many of you have read this book. It's by Opal Whiteley. She was 8 years of age when she wrote this. The Singing Creek Where the Willows Grow. It's a mystical, beautiful diary of this young child who grew up in the woods and only knew the woods. Never really left the woods until she was much older. So if you've not read the book, it's quite an amazing book. All the times I was picking up potatoes, I did have conversations with them. 2, I did have thinks of all their growing days there in the ground and all the things they did hear. Earth voices are glad voices, and earth songs come up from the ground through the plants. And in their flowering and in the days before these days are come, they do tell the earth songs to the wind. I have thinks these potatoes growing here did have knowings of star songs. I'm just going to share a few shots with you from what happened today. And then I want to open it up to what all of you would be most helped by in terms of getting started, or what crops you'd like to grow, or, what's successful here, in what season, what crop rotations we use, how do we choose that? So those are kind of some questions that I've heard from people who are interested in starting a family garden, as well as where do you put it? How do you mend the soil? Where do you start? Okay, so we'll go through a few pictures and then we'll come back to that. So these are shots of the garden at North Forest School of Integrated Studies. On the left, this is cleaning corn. And so we have a special machine that we take the corn off of the cob with. And because we grow flower corn here at the farm, it's very colorful, it's very different. Each cob is different. There's blue ones and red ones and orange ones and green ones. And the kids love to see the seed pop off of the corn. Later, we grind that corn into cornmeal. And then later on, we make cornbread. And that's what we did today, because today it's still a little early for food. On this right upper slide, this is a slide of a frame that we made out of willow, kind of like a little lodge for peas to grow on. And instead of having something that's not, from nature itself supporting our trellised crops, you can trellis crops using branches, small branches, tying them together, and they love growing on that. And it's beautiful. And then this is Seed Saving 101 with our sunflowers that we grew last year in the garden. Most of them volunteered, but they got very, very, very big, about 10 feet tall. And so we have those, and we have seen them volunteer again in this garden right now. So they'll keep on going, and the kids cleaned the sunflower seeds and took a lot of them home. This is today. And so what we did today was we split the children into an earth group, a leaf group, and a flower group. And we had them as an earth group, we had them planting carrots and beets and radish, because those are crops that express themselves the most through the earth as a root. So they understood that some part of them was drawn to that root crop, and they self-selected where they wanted to go as far as planting certain plants. This group is the leaf group. This group planted cabbages, broccolis, and some other types of cabbages in a pre-prepared bed. When a lot of children are gardening together, the whole challenge with that is being prepared so that they can just get down in there and start going to work. So we pre-dug the little holes for all of the broccolis and cabbages. We grew the broccolis and cabbages. We seeded them at school. We brought them back here to the greenhouse to get big. And then they made that connection by putting them in the garden. We'll have more of those plants for sale as a fundraiser for the school, and they will have grown those plants as well as lots of others. So this is the leaf group planting the leaf crops on a transplant day, and they will grow onto cabbage and broccoli. Another shot of the leaf group. Okay, now this is a pretty interesting thing to do with kids. So kids all love lasagna. They love to make it, they love to, they love to eat it, etc. So they can connect with lasagna as a food. But they may not connect with it as something that you can do on the earth. But they do connect that when you put certain elements together on the earth, that what happens is magic. So we made the allegory of the lasagna, and the sauce in the lasagna was the green materials. So the green materials are composting, cow manure, any vegetable manure, any vegetable leavings, green grass clippings, etc. The next thing was the noodles, and the noodles were all of the woody stuff that's coming out of the garden right now as I'm trimming, and a little bit of old perennial leavings, branches, just kind of the brownish stuff that we get rid of in the springtime. Not wood though, not trees. And then the cheese was the straw, not just any straw. So this is oat straw that has been left outside purposely to mold. And so everybody knows that cheese gets made with mold, or some cheeses do. At least they know that cheeses are cultured. So that's why we call the straw the cheese, because that cheese, when we put it in the pile, makes all of the microorganisms take off when it's combined with the vegetable material, old manure, and some woody things. Each time we put a layer down, we water it really thoroughly. And we put this lasagna bed, quote unquote, on a place where we want the soil to get improved. Right now, it just has weeds on it. But what we want it to be is a raised bed, ultimately, to grow things in, flowers, vegetables, herbs, whatever we choose to do. So the start is to put it on top of the earth, and that calls the earthworms to come up through what it is that we're putting on top of the earth. So this is our cheese going on. And this is our crew watering our lasagna so that our lasagnas can start cooking. We put a few things in the lasagna that feed it. Like we put a biodynamic preparation in there called barrel compost, and that starts to feed the microbes in there. And the kids were really, of course, excited about watering, and everybody got wet. And this is our crew. So that's our lasagna bed in front of us, and this is our crew in planting in our family garden, and they get welcomed back to plant or be or look at all the things that they've started in the garden, both here at the farm as well as down in Peonia at their school. So now I'm going to turn my screen off. Yep. And we're going to just chat about things that I think are really helpful. So far, questions? Any questions?
Hi, I have a question about cover crops.
Yeah.
Could you list off a few more and maybe tell us where we might be able to find the seeds?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So cover crops are very seasonal in terms of where they do the best and when they do the best. So in our climate, cover crops that grow all the way through the winter and then resprout in the spring would be rye, baking rye, or winter rye, it's called. You can use peas with them, but not the peas that you want to eat, the peas that are called winter peas. Okay, those are really good for they nurse themselves up the rye. So you've got a legume and a cereal together, and the legume and the cereal then provide a lot of biomass and a lot of nitrogen when you start taking those cover crops down at the end. So that's my favorite. I guess the other favorite, the other thing that I would throw into that mix if I had it would be hairy vetch. The other, of course, the other grain that you can use is any kind of winter wheat, right? And there's lots of different kinds. And winter wheat does the best if it's planted in the fall, a little prior to the freeze, so that it sprouts. But it will sprout right back up in the spring. And so I oftentimes get it in pretty late September because I'm busy. But if you can get it in early September, same thing with the rye, you're golden. Then summer crops that are gonna grow and sprout and do really well in the summer and provide bee food for the bees would be sorghum. That's a huge crop. Gets really tall, 9 feet tall sometimes. Lots of biomass with that. Buckwheat is my favorite summer crop. Buckwheat is, you can plant buckwheat alone. You just have to wait until you're pretty close to no frost. And then buckwheat, you just broadcast it wherever you've got bare dirt. And it'll come up, and in 30 days, it's done, totally done. It's come up, it's flowered, it's provided bee food, it's been a pollinator plant, and you can mow it off and it's done. And it provides quite a bit of biomass, not as much as the other grains, but quite a bit. So sorghum, buckwheat. Now, there's some transitional crops also that are great because they provide thatch. And one of my favorite ones is oats. Oats is just phenomenal mulch. So if you grow oats in the fall and you let them winter kill, so you have to sprout them up and get them pretty good going, by June, July, you need to do them. Maybe late July, early August at the latest. But you get them up and you get them growing. Barley is another one that works like that too. Grow them up and let them die, because they will. When it frosts, they'll die. But put them in a place where the following spring, you want to plant something that needs mulch. So I put them oftentimes in where I'm going to put potatoes. And then I come right behind in the thatch, make a furrow, put the potatoes in, and draw the thatch over the potatoes. And a lot of the reason I do that is not just because I want to mulch the potatoes, but it's because the nutrition that the oats provide to the potatoes is key. And then the disguising of the potato plant when it comes up by the oat mulch keeps the potato beetle away. So that's a really nice combination. And if you go into a gardening library, you'll find a really great book called Carrots Love Tomatoes. That is the best companion planting book I have ever seen, hands down. So get a copy of Carrots Love Tomatoes. And in that book, it talks about all of the different combinations that you can do throughout the year when you're planting. Great question. Yeah, cover cropping is a real art. I love cover cropping. It falls right into my rotation. I usually will cover crop an area for 2 successive years to get the nutrition back, and sometimes 3. And so, for instance, this year where I'm going to put my tomatoes and my squashes and my peppers, hot, heat-loving, long season crops who are fairly heavy feeders, that's had 3 successive cover crop years. And now all that cover crop has been tilled in. Every time it comes up, mowed off, let it lay. Every time it comes back, mow it off, let it lay. It's been pulled into the soil really early this spring to decompose. You need to give at least 2 weeks after you pull it down into the soil to let it decompose before you can plant it. Okay, because you'll get some decreased nitrogen initially because of the burn up of the cover crop. But that bed is specifically chosen for heavy feeders. There are other beds who've only had 1 cover crop, other beds that have 2, and those get successively less and less heavy feeding plants. I consider any green, a lettuce, any green that's grown all the way up or grown to harvest and you're finished with it, that's a cover crop. That just goes right back into the soil. It doesn't get pulled up, just gets mown down. Same thing with a lot of other crops that are, that are short-lived. Brassicas, man, they are the very best at decomposing into the soil. They have a lot of nutrition and they're pretty heavy feeders. So I don't usually use brassicas on a 1-year cover crop. I put them in a 2-year cover crop. Okay, so there's a whole art around our crop rotation, and one of the very best texts I've ever read is Maria Thun, Thun, Gardening for Life. It's a very thin little text, and it's awesome. Teaches you exactly how to do root to leaf to air or flower to fire or seed, and that rotation is what the plants really want to do, theoretically, from root all the way to their fruition as a seed. If you follow that rotation, you'll never really compromise your plants. They'll always be happy and they'll have plenty of nutrition. Yeah, thanks. That was a great question. I love doing cover crops. Yeah.
Thank you.
Others, questions? Anyone? Okay, I'm going to throw a few things out then. Okay, so I alluded to the idea that when you're starting a family garden, the age of your children while doing that is really kind of something you need to help them with. Any kid can go out and do things in the garden with you, but there are certain things at certain ages like better. So little children, 2 and 3 years old, all the way up to about 5, love to pick things. That is their main deal. They love to pick things. And so in your garden, if you can add in things that are very obvious to children to pick and put them in places that they obviously can go and step without stepping on other plants. A good example of that is a strawberry border. They can wander around in a strawberry border as long as they want. They don't hurt the strawberries. Raspberries are another famous one. Black raspberries, any kind of berry that can be upright where they can see where the berries are. And that teaches them also with raspberries when to pick them. Because a lot of times they'll pick them and they'll put them in their mouth and they'll be like, that doesn't taste very good. And that's because they're not ripe. So they need to know when they're ripe. The other thing that little ones love to pick are peas. And so I often will put peas in a very accessible place on an edge with a trellis of some sort, willows, because kids love to pick peas and eat them right there. And that's one of the best things about family gardening is you oftentimes don't get your produce in the kitchen before half of it gets eaten. But hey, what better thing could that be? So those are itty bitty kids, just they love to pick things, anything. I don't care what it is. They love to pick flowers. They love to pick blossoms. They really are observant about what's growing on plants that they can pull into themselves. When they get a little bit older, like 5 to maybe 7 or 8, then it seems like they shift a little bit. Their attention span is a little longer, for one thing, and they're a little bigger and they're a little more sturdy when they're walking. So they're not so timid in the garden. And you can actually make a place for them to be, and they'll get it. This is the path. This isn't the path. This one is the path. This isn't the path. And they'll start to understand the places where gardening is happening and the places where humans are happening. So they also, when they're about 5 to 7, they like seeds that are about the size of a corn or a pea or a bean or a squash seed or a nasturtium seed as far as flowers go, a sunflower seed, all those seeds that can fit in their hand and be seen individually. They love those kinds of seeds. And those kinds of seeds are easy for them to understand how deep they go. So we use our fingers as measuring, and we tell them a sunflower seed goes to your first knuckle. And sometimes it goes to your second knuckle if the ground is cool and the seed needs to sit for a while. So we use our fingers to teach kids where the seeds go. So whatever depth the seed goes, we just make a mark in our minds, half a nail, a knuckle down, etc. And they get it, they understand, oh, okay, that's how deep. The tendency with little ones is they want to put them way down in there and they don't come up. So I oftentimes will come back in the garden at school and plant over them so they do come up. Once the kids get a little bit older, say 8 until about 10, that's a transition area developmentally for children. And in that transition area is where they're starting to get capable of taking on something that's their job in the garden all the time. So if there's a certain thing that they like to do in the garden, maybe it's watering, maybe it's picking, maybe it's cultivating, maybe they like to get tools in and learn how to cultivate. That age group right there, 8 to 10, maybe even a little older, is where they can get jobs. And those jobs should be of their choosing and something that they love to do. Gardening should always be fun, always. When they get older, in the more like preteen area, 11 to 13 and onward, jobs get more specific and more purposeful so that they're going to result in something. So for instance, this year, Candace, my partner, chose to do a fundraiser for the school. And the seeds that she chose to plant were seeds that were good for kids that were from 4th grade on to 6th. Some 3rd graders too, because they fit and they got it about how deep they should go. They got it that we could be inside in the winter and that they needed to be focused and quiet while they were seeding flats. They helped us plant them. They helped us water them in. They have helped us up pot them from the small little tiny cells to the next cell, and they will help us sell them. So kids that are a little older, they're really enterprising. They love to think that they'll do something and then they'll sell it, or they'll do something and they'll share it in some way out in their community, with their grandmother, with their mother, on Mother's Day for a gift, you name it. I cannot have a gardening class with those children at NIFSIS or my own without sending something home. They love to plant something and take it home. And so don't be surprised if your school where your child is attending has a gardening program, if they show up with all kinds of pots of this and that's and that's and this, and help them, nurture them on. So that's kind of a synopsis of school age and what you can do with them. There's gobs more information. I mean, gobs more, but that's another really important thing. One other thing I wanted to touch on is how do you get started, right? Like you move to a place and maybe they had a garden there once before, or maybe there's never been a garden, or, like there's this lawn and gosh, should I tear it up or should I water it? If you're gardening on a big scale, like you're trying to do a farm and you're trying to actually establish crop rotations on a 1/4 acre or less, maybe an 1/8 to a 1/4 acre, that's a big, huge garden. So you got to take it in pieces. And saying ultimately I want a 1/4 acre means that the first year you're going to start with a 1/16 of an acre. And the remainder of that quarter acre is in cover. That's how you start. Only a small chunks at a time. Because if you do small chunks at a time, you'll learn more about what you're seeing, and not be so overwhelmed with weeds, because weeds are just going to come back. If you're going to denude the earth, they have a purpose. They're going to come back, and they should come back, because that's what we want them to do, is put a blanket on the earth. So anytime I've got bare earth from, say, like, February on into this time of year, it's getting seeds on it. Yeah, it's got to get covered somehow. That be mulch or cover crop or something that keeps it waiting until I'm ready to plant into it. So first tip, don't start big, start small. A quarter acre is what I grow in, and it even has like trees and bushes and raspberries and perennials and all kinds of stuff in it, in just that quarter acre. And I actually take crops to market. So you can do a lot on a quarter acre. Most people have gardens that are like 25 by 50 or 25 by 25 even. Another way to be really successful is by raised beds. And it's a good learning experience to do a raised bed if you've never done one before, if you've never done a garden before, because you can control what's going on in a raised bed. Make the bed, or put the bed up, construct it, put the dirt in, voila, put your seeds in and grow. The dirt that you put in is usually something that is store-bought, not something that comes off the place. But it's a great way to learn. And once you've learned what a raised bed needs as far as water and seeds and so forth, then, moving to like what we did today, a lasagna bed, is a really good way to take portions of what will be your family garden and put them in a place where your soil is being improved. It takes about 2 seasons for that to go down to the place where you can actually plant into it, depending on how high you build the lasagna. If you build the lasagna 3 feet tall and you cover it with straw and sprinkle some soil, regular garden soil, into holes in the lasagna bed, you can plant squash and some crops that just love that gooey, composty, really fertile thing, and you'll grow fine crops in even the season that you're making it. But for it to really, really break down in our dry climate, it's got to be kept moist, and it does need to be, pretty 2 feet-ish off the ground, and maybe even depressed down in the ground a little bit. But that's a really good way to get started. So that you're not out there just, chipping away at clay soil, and that can get really frustrating. So that's another tip about just getting started. Soil tests, I've done them sometimes, I've not done them sometimes. Amending soil is something that I almost always do with whatever's on the farm. I have cows, I have chickens. That manure is perfect for this climate and this soil. But you can do the same thing with cover crops for fertility. As a boost, you can use a nitrogen source like fish emulsion. That works really well to boost plants. I make lots and lots of compost tea out of herbs. Good herbs to put in compost tea are nettles, comfrey, yarrow, alfalfa. So if you have a farmer near you that has an alfalfa field, alfalfa is wonderful in compost tea, lots of minerals. And so lots of times when you come here in the summer, or when I'm going to the school, I'm bringing buckets of tea. Tea also, coffee grounds, eggshells, lots of things that, I always have a compost bucket going. But I have chickens that eat them. So I highly recommend a gateway animal is a chicken. If you can do a chicken, man, they're just amazing at turning your kitchen scraps into fertility. They're wonderful. So amending your soil, really a lot of it is very individual to your site. But most of us around here have clay. And so most of the time what we need is air into the soil. And it really helps to put that blanket on it of a lasagna bed to just get the warmth going. And then you can fork around in there and you'll find that the soil gets really friable in not too long at all. I'm gonna quit talking. I need to listen. My voice is going like, ah. Anybody else got an offering about what helps them?
Hi, Pat. It's working now.
Hey, Callie.
Hi. How are you?
Hi,
They're
Val.
sweet. This is wonderful. The raised bed stuff was great because, you know, I'm here in Denver and just have my 2 little beds that I'm trying to nurse and produce as much as I can. So any help for the small urban gardener is where I'm at.
Right. Raised beds work really, they work really well. The one thing I would say about raised beds is let the bed contact the earth. Don't try to, do weed mat underneath your bed thinking that you're gonna, prevent yourself from getting weeds. You're not. And what you're gonna prevent is this barrier of what the earth needs to do to contact its sister up above, right? So I highly recommend straight to the earth with whatever planting material you're using in your raised beds. Yes, you'll get a few weeds, but you'll get a whole lot more worms, a whole lot more, okay? And don't be afraid to just dump stuff on your bed at the end of summer, for the winter. Just put vegetable matter. The only thing I wouldn't put on as a regular practice is tomatoes, because tomato vines can sometimes have viruses in them that transmit into the soil, and you can have some difficulty with tomatoes. But there's very few other crops that I wouldn't just chop up and put on your bed as mulch for the winter time. And by spring, the freeze thaw will eventually break that stuff down and you can just till it right in. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think raised beds are really helpful in garden areas. I do think they should be interspersed with permanent plantings. So another thing that I think is kind of important in family gardens is, particularly if you have a city lot, that you're gardening in, and it's not particularly large, try to put one part of it in the wild. So try to let one part of it just go wild if you can. If you can stand the weeds and you can beat the weeds back in different ways, you can let them go wild. What'll happen there is you'll understand what does well. You'll give a place for what I call the elemental beings who help us in our work. Beings that are connected with the earth, with the water, with the air, with the fire. Those beings know they will have a place where they can proliferate and help you in your work. And so a wild place in a corner of an urban lot is really important. I think anything can go there. Shrubs, currants, are great edible shrubs and they're super hardy. Nanking cherry bushes are great. Lilac bushes are great. So you can get some big bushes in that corner and then plant all around it with all kinds of different annual plants. You'll be amazed at the seeds that'll come off of it. And a lot of gardeners, that's where they do their seeding, is they harvest their seeds, throw it in the wild area, see what grows, harvest it next year. I know I do that a lot here. And I have tons of volunteers everywhere. Let's see, some better websites. USDA organic. Always buy your plants locally if you can. We have plenty of places to buy plants here. We have Delicious Orchards now has a new Oasis Nursery is there. Zephyr's Farm and Garden has a plant sale that goes all the way through the end of April and mid-May. And they have organic starts. And those organic starts are just really healthy. They've been doing this a long time and they know what they're doing. And they have flowers, herbs, vegetables, etc. Arbol Market in Paonia will be starting very soon. And at that market, you can also find starts that were locally grown. So I really feel strongly that we need to support our local community of growers, and we have so many of them and so many outlets now. You should be able to find everything you need. Good question. Best way to water. Oh Lord, yeah. Oh my goodness. Watering is a trick here. I would say it depends on what you're growing as to whether you drip it or you overhead it. To get seeds up, it's almost impossible unless they're in a straight line and you definitely know where your range is to get them up with drip. So things like carrots, little tiny seeds like arugula, even the mustards, it's really difficult to get them up with drip. But you can sprinkle them up, and once they're up and you see them, then you can apply drip. There's lots of different drip tubing to use. The T-tape is not my favorite, but I do like spaghetti drip. There's a spaghetti tubing that's 1/4 inch that has emitters in the spaghetti tube. I really like that for small family gardens because you can see it, it's on the surface. If you trip on it, no big deal. You're not going to fall down and hurt yourself. You're just going to pull it up and you can put it back. So I do like drip. I do like mulching over drip. That's a really good thing to do. There are certain plants in the garden that really appreciate not having overhead watering because it gets them to having too much watery forces in their leaves. And one of the famous ones is tomatoes. Tomatoes would always prefer to be watered at ground level. Another one is, believe it or not, sometimes squash. Squash likes to be at ground level also. So if you can make a hole instead of a hill, make a basin and put yourself 5 seeds in there and a dripper, that's it. That's all it needs, and some mulch. I think another plant that people often grow is beans and peas and, help me out here, guys. What else do you grow? All kinds of stuff. Onions, garlic, the potatoes, all that stuff. Potatoes like to be regularly, deeply watered. And so you can do that. You can do that overhead, but it's got to be deep. They don't like surface watering. They'll just make a million little potatoes and they won't get big. So they like regular, deep watering. I do it by flood up here. It's not efficient, but I get great potatoes. And I flood my garlic also. Same thing with garlic. Same thing with onions. They like to dry out in between. So regular, deep watering with those crops, however you can do it. Once carrots and beets and radishes and celery, lettuce and spinach and all the greens, once they're up, you can drip those things as long as you mulch around them, but they really prefer to be sprinkled. They just like it. That's just what they want. And so as long as you're not drowning them and as long as you can afford to do a little bit of overhead, I would suggest that you do it with those tiny seeded crops, basils and anything of the leafy variety. I try to give them a nice shower. And then I let them dry out before I harvest them. I don't harvest wet crops. That's asking for mold and trouble. Herbs that grow synergistically. Yeah, some great ones. So some of the great ones are yarrow loves valerian. Comfrey loves yarrow, loves valerian, loves anything that it can help fertilize. So if you have another patch nearby where you're growing strawberries or raspberries and you can tolerate a big comfrey plant, put it there because it really likes to help the other plants. I love nettle, but you have to know where it is because if your kids step in it, they won't like it. And then they'll have an aversion to nettle, and that's not good. We want them to like nettle because it's so good for them. Dandelion is another one that is really helpful to put anywhere in around root crops because the dandelion draws in the light, and it really helps structure root crops. So I let my dandelions go, and that's a really perfect companion plant. I have other herbalists on this call. I would love for them to chime in with other companion plants that they like. Hello, Alicia.
Hello, everybody. I was kind of typing an answer there. I think calendula is an awesome companion plant and also a good one if you're thinking for short-term one-year garden. You'll be able to get a lot of harvests off of that, and it is very helpful to the plants that it grows near. So I think that that is a fun one. As far as like an annual crop that you will be really stoked with the results of, I think ashwagandha is a fun one. That is super useful medicinal herb that grows pretty well in our climate, and you can make a little patch, and it's not one that you'll get a lot of harvests out of, but by the fall you'll have a good harvest that will keep you through the winter at least. And so so I really enjoy growing ashwagandha here. And let's see, I think they all grow synergistically when planted adjacent to one another because plants create a relationship, and so they're all going to sort of make a relationship with each other. I've seen dandelion and marshmallow grow really nicely together. However, marshmallow is probably not a great one to start this year, and especially here we have so much of the Malva neglecta that you might as well just make the most of that. It's probably already in your yard, since you have sort of a one season project that you're working on. And also, I think St. John's wort is another great one to bring into the garden for a longer term project, and like 1 year project. I don't know how much you'd get off of it. However, I find that when I do start picking, like if you get a bigger plant to start with, and I would take it with you when you go, but you can get a lot of, pick off of it for a month or so. And so you'd be able to, have a good harvest there. And also it brings that lovely sun energy into your garden space.
Yeah. And I have a proliferation of St. John's wort. Most people know that. So if anybody needs St. John's wort, you just let me know. I have a ton of it. Another one I like a lot is red clover. Fabulous plant. So red clover typically is grown as a cover crop, but when you put it in as a cover crop, it will show up pretty much everywhere, all around your landscape, wherever it can get a foothold. And it's a beautiful plant. It blooms red. Blooms like now. It's going to start blooming up here pretty soon, and it blooms all summer long, and it's very drought tolerant. Red clover, not the white Dutch clover, but the red clover will grow in full sunlight. It gets a really deep tap root, It's what my cows will like travel for miles in my garden and run from me when I'm trying to kick them out, just so they can chew on some red clover. So that's another really great medicinal herb. Another really prolific one for me up here is motherwort, and that's a mint, and it spreads really prolifically by seed. And so sometimes it actually can be a little problematic. So I just cut the seeds off, and do something else with them. And then it doesn't reseed itself everywhere. Echinacea, I love echinacea. It's such a beautiful plant, and it just really can go anywhere in the landscape. It does not fussy about sunlight. It'll go full sun, it'll go dappled shade, etc. So playing around with the medicinals is a really good thing to do, because you just get so much from who they are as you grow them. Particularly if you use them in your diet or make teas out of them anyway. When you grow them, you really get it from them, what they are. Yeah. Just dandelion, Michael. Yeah, dandelion is, it'll proliferate. I don't care what you do. If you grow, let me think what else got out of it. Oh, I know, milk thistle. Yeah, if you like milk thistle and you want its energetics, if you plant it, it will reseed itself. So if you don't like the idea of thistle coming up in unwanted places, thistle can be a little bit of an invaser. St. John's wort is definitely very invasive. If you get it going, you will always have it. Same thing with comfrey. But comfrey, at least for me at this altitude, doesn't get invasive, but it's everywhere, and it's really a great plant. It's one of those wonderful permaculture plants that when you need mulch, you just go whack down a comfrey plant and chop it up and put it on something, and you got instant mulch of a really good quality that's not going to break down very quickly. So oats, fabulous medicinal plant. From the oat straw to the milky oat top to you name it, great plant, and easy and great for cover. Just put it in places where you've got bare dirt, water it up, use it. Yeah, so oats are another really good one. Okay. Any other questions? I don't want to keep you guys, but I don't want to rush you out. I've got, I can talk. I talk. I can talk. I do have a book I want to show you. So this book, can you see it, or is it backwards? It's probably backwards.
No, that's right.
You can see it? Okay. This is a wonderful book. It's written by a Waldorf gardening teacher. And it's by the rhythms, by age group. And it is just the sweetest book on children's gardening. Very sweet book. This is Ronnie Sands and Willow Summer, Growing Sustainable Children, a garden teacher's guide. This is another one that I love. Green Fingers and Muddy Boots. Another really, really good kids gardening book. Really excellent. Easy. Lots of cool activities in here for kids to do. Cool pictures about gardens. Very cool book. That's by Ivor Santor. And then I can't let anybody go away without Elliot Coleman. If you haven't started a garden before, this is your guy. He can tell you what you need to do, from cold frames to what to do inside in a greenhouse to what to do outside to, all kinds of tricks of the trade. He's the master. He's a really, really good guy. And this is an old book, but Elliot Coleman has made just a name for himself in the United States as somebody who can introduce you to gardening and have you feel competent in no time at all. This is another really nice little book about starting permaculture. It's called Getting Started in Permaculture. Ross and Jenny Mars, they've been writing books all the time, for a long time. I really like this book also for just easy principles about permaculture. You know, you don't have to do the whole 9 yards, get yourself certified, etc. You just need some tips. And then my favorite, because I'm a dairy person, if you ever do get into cows and you need a book, this is the one. It's called Keeping a Family Cow by Joanne S. Groman, German, really sweet lady. Just a lovely book about taking care of cows. And I have a family cow. I don't have a dairy. I have 2 cows. I have a mama cow and her daughter. The mama cow is pregnant. The daughter is not. When it's time or close to time for the mom to calve, the daughter will leave, go get pregnant. Mama will have her calf. The daughter will come back after she's pregnant in about 2 months, and they'll be a nice tiny little family. And depending upon what the sex is of the calf that's born this summer, the sex rotates into the herd or rotates out. If it's a boy, then a lot of times we'll eat him later, like in a couple years. If it's a girl, sometimes we'll keep her, sometimes we'll pass her on to another dairy. Dairy cows are really valuable in this sustainable agriculture environment because not that many people keep small herds and keep them on the same land for a long time so they get to know where they are. And the products that come out of a small, tiny little micro dairy are incredible, really good. And they're great for fertility for the land. So, you know, although they're not a gateway animal by any means, they got to have shelter and they got to have plenty to graze, and they're, you know, they're challenging. They're kind of the peak of the food chain in terms of the quality of their manure, what they do for the land, who they are. They're just huge meditators on legs. But in terms of a gateway animal, the very best one to start with is chickens. Can't recommend it enough. Super easy. Make them a little coop, put them in your backyard. You'll never regret it. You get eggs, you get manure, they scratch up your garden where you need them to. And if you can put them away, put them away. They're great. Really, really great. So that's my book choices, in addition to the one I said earlier, which is Gardening for Life by Maria Thun, Thun. Gets you a little bit of an introduction into biodynamics, gets you down the path that way without getting super complicated about it. The thing I like about it the most is the way that she presents plants and how to characterize them and rotating them. So, yeah. All right. Yeah, you're welcome for the book suggestions. Yeah. Susan, oh, herbs around fruit trees. Oh, that's a really good question. Comfrey, for sure, for sure. Mint, for sure, mint. Any of the alliums. So garlic, shallots, and don't worry about harvesting. Let them go to seed, just let them be there. They're like a permanent crop. Just let them be there. If you don't mind it, your trees will love nettle. Nettle is just incredibly helpful for any perennial plant. because it has one ingredient that our soils do not naturally have, and that's iron. And so they will really help your trees not have any kind of chlorosis, which is what we get when we don't have enough iron. That's the traditional kind of permaculture guild that we put around a tree. The other thing that we sometimes put around trees, permaculture speaking, is narcissus bulbs. And the reason we do that is because it keeps burrowing mole-like creatures away from the tree roots. They don't like narcissus. Or they do, and they'll go after the narcissus before they go after the tree roots. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about pollinating. It's so important to have pollinator plants. However you can get them in there, make a perennial part of your garden bee there so that those bees get fed early in the spring. It is the way to get good quality fruit, good quality vegetables. If you have a lot of pollinators, you'll never lack for lots of squash and cucumbers and tomatoes and you name it. Anything that fruits, the pollinators are key to that. And they need our help, for sure. Okay, I'm feeling closure with this group, unless people have another burning question.
I am so grateful for you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
What a gift. So many valuable tips. I can't wait to go out and plant more and more to support the trees and of course the birds and the bees and everybody. But
right.
We are so blessed with VOGA, Learning Council.
Well, you know, it was really funny today because I was hoping that the kids would notice this, but none of them did. I emptied all the bird feeders. And they're everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere. You look, there's a bird feeder. And I emptied them all. And I was hoping that they would say, Grandma Pat, can we? Because they've filled the bird feeders here before. But they didn't notice. But I do purposely empty them now. And the reason I empty them is to make them get strong. You know, they don't need that sunflower seed hanging around and all that thistle and the Niger. And they don't need that now. They need to figure it out on their own. And they need to eat the bugs that are coming out that are going to ruin my fruit. And they, you know, so that's another tip is don't feed the birds right now. If you've been feeding the birds all winter, you've done your work. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you, Pat. This was really an amazing session. Sorry about my cat here.
No,
that was really wonderful to hear so much from you and so comprehensive.
You're
really
welcome.
a great information session. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.